And recording has started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar, Lessons from the Restaurant Business Frontline in the Early Days of COVID. This is another in our series on running a business during and after the COVID pandemic. I'm Steve Smith, business mentor and co-chair here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host. Our presenter today is Bill Taibe, and I'll tell you more about Bill in just 1 second. First, some useful information about today's event. Number one, we have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, please use the chat window at any time and put your question in there. It's located in the lower part of your screen. The webinar will end sharply at 1 o'clock to respect everyone's time. Important point here, everyone wants to know the answer to this. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available in the next 48 hours on our website at SCORE, scorefairfieldcounty.org. So first, let me just say a few words about SCORE in general. Many of you are very familiar with SCORE, but it is a part of the U.S. Small Business Administration and therefore has received a tremendous amount of focus in the last 3 to 4 months, as you can imagine. SCORE has about 300 offices, plus or minus, and over 10,000 volunteers throughout the United States. In Fairfield County, our office, when we had a physical location, was in Norwalk. And we had 140 volunteers with a very wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. With those mentors, we offered 3 value-added services to the small business community. One was free one-on-one counseling. We used to do that face-to-face, either at a venue of our client's choice or at our office in Norwalk. We now do it via telephone, email, Zoom, or any other video conferencing kind of a technique. If you would like to receive one-on-one counseling during this tumultuous time, please do so by accessing the website, scorefairfieldcounty.org, again, and press request a mentor on our website. The rest will be taken care of by us, and you will receive an answer within 24 hours. The second thing we do is educational workshops and webinars. And because of COVID, we've switched now all to webinars, and we do 3 to 4 of those a week. And this is one of them, so you're right on top of that. We expect to be able to return to face-to-face workshops sometime later in the year, hopefully. The other thing that is really important, and people tend to underestimate the power of the resources that are actually resident on our website. There's lots of experience and templates that you can use to build business plans, financial projects, get information about digital marketing and other things that are topical today. So go to the website either to request the one-on-one counseling, to sign up for a future webinar, or to take advantage of the intellectual capital that resides on that site. Our next webinar is on July 14th, that's next Tuesday, and it will be franchise ownership. So please check out the website for this and sign up if it's in your strike zone. So now I'm going to get off of this internal stuff and get on to Bill Taibe, who's executive chef and restaurant owner. He founded and operates The Whelk, which is a seafood and oyster bar, Kawani, a Japanese-inspired pub, and very recently, a restaurant, Don Memo, as a Mexican cantina. All 3 are located in Westport, Connecticut. Since 2009, his restaurant group has evolved from a staff of 6 to over 80 employees. He has created employment opportunities and programs such as Kitchen Share to increase the quality of life for his employees. Bill was named a James Beard Best Chefs in America Northeast semifinalist in 2011, 12, 13, and 15. 14, you must have been on vacation, Bill. So now I'll turn it over to Bill, and Bill will take you through his experience during COVID, and you may hear me jump in once or twice along the way. So Bill, take it over.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and for anybody that might have a question, or if there's a topic that you want me to kind of stick on a little bit further, just put it in the chat section, and Steve can kind of direct me through. But if we want to start moving through, you know, it's been a challenging time for all of us, as we can imagine. But you know, in the restaurant industry in particular, which is my world, it's been challenging, but it's also been exciting. And you know what I mean by that is there's been a great opportunity for us to maneuver and pivot and kind of change the structure of our business. And I just always that's kind of what I live for, and what I really look forward to is the opportunity to constantly make my businesses better and stronger. So, you know, in March, as we were all watching, mid-March, as we were watching COVID-19 kind of take over parts of the world, but not necessarily make its way into Fairfield County yet, there was this word of a party in Westport. And lo and behold, some of the members at the party, at that famous party, were some friends and investors of mine. So I kind of got an inside look, or pretty early, I got an inside scoop early, what was about to hit Westport. It just so happened on March 11th, I was set to interview for a podcast that a friend and myself were working on and ready to launch. We were interviewing the head of Weston Health District, Mark Cooper. And Mark had called us on March 11th about noon. We were set to interview him about 2 o'clock at the Westport Library. About noon, he called and said he's going to have to reschedule because word had gotten out that there was a large party in Westport and a group of people were infected, and they were shutting the school system down. So that was Wednesday. So, you know, before anybody else knew locally what was happening, I had got a sort of an inside look. And, you know, it kind of, obviously, as you can imagine, it hit us pretty hard. But fortunately, what I do, and I joke all the time that I struggle terribly from ADD. So when I get bored, I create chaos. And when there is chaos, I thrive. So Wednesday hit. Thursday, you know, that evening was a sort of typical, the word hadn't got out yet, it was a typical service in the restaurants, but we all knew that it was going to get a little weird. So Wednesday, Thursday, fast forward to Friday, and I just felt, this is pre-mandate from the governor to shut down. I felt that I started to get a little worried that maybe my staff and myself and my customers were being put into harm's way. So that Saturday, the 14th of March, I decided midday, I had a similar to this, I had a FaceTime meeting with all 80 employees from all 3 restaurants. I sat in one and everyone else got on. And I had told them on Saturday that we'd be going to a 50% occupancy, and that, you know, we were going to kind of follow this closely. And about an hour and a half later, my gut told me that that wasn't the right choice. And I told all the managers that we were flipping immediately that Saturday night and going to curbside. I wanted to make sure that we did not introduce any new people into our restaurant. I just couldn't carry the burden of maybe one of our staff members or one of our customers getting sick. We didn't know enough about this. So that Saturday, about a week and a half before the governor had put his mandate for stay at home and closures, we decided to shut down. And I think it was probably the best thing we could have ever done. I wanted to get ahead of it. I wanted to sort of set the standard for what it looked like to deal with this situation, but offer curbside dining in Westport. We have a really great community around us. I knew that they would trust us, and I knew that they would help us through this. But I wanted to make sure that I was the first to do it. That, you know, the restaurant group was the first to do it, and we kind of set the standard for what it looked like. So immediately we went into action and you know, started thinking of marketing and social media plans. How do we transform our kitchens? If you can imagine, when cooks, and, you know, we have big kitchen staffs. So when everybody's used to going through their motions, and we train them to work in unison, to essentially be robotic and to be consistent. So when all of a sudden, when the food now has to find its way on a Saturday from China and from plates that they're typically used to plating now in to-go containers, it was an interesting situation, but we got through that Saturday. You know, I had put out a video, which I don't do very often, but I decided, instead of trying to message and send a message out through social media, I would just get in front of a camera and I'd post something through our 3 social media websites, all 3 restaurants and my own personally, telling the community what was happening and why we were doing what we were doing. And I don't do that very often. So I think people, were interested to see what I had to say. And that was sort of the beginning of the whole thing. And from that moment, everything changed in our lives, in our world, within my restaurant group and personally with, for my friends and my family. And we forged ahead to figure out what this was going to look like. Immediately as we went to this takeout curbside, we had a meeting between managers and, top essential employees, and we decided how we were going to take care of our staff. We had almost 80 full-time employees, about 78 full-time employees with a couple part-time employees. And obviously we didn't need all those people. Front of the house employees became non-essential waiters. We didn't need them anymore. And what we decided was we were going to hang on to all of our kitchen staff, offer every one of our kitchen staff and dishwashers an opportunity to stay on with us, which in all 3 restaurants, each and every one of them did. Nobody decided to leave. We kept on our salaried managers, and we allowed the salaried managers, as I sat with each one of them, and we decided who sort of was going to be next in line for a few different maybe assistants or people they would need to help answer phones and bring food out to the cars. So we made decisions based on seniority and families and people that we thought would need it most. And then we sent some of the people that we thought would be okay going to collect unemployment. So unfortunately, we had to lay off a good amount of our staff. About 60% of it we had to send home. And as you can imagine, that's a really difficult situation. It just all came crashing down on us. We immediately put together, and I jumped into, because then it started to hit me, well, with the people we have in and this invisible enemy that we're fighting, I now have to worry about people leaving the restaurants as well. So we put together some promissory notes. We had some really intense meetings with our staff, explaining to them if they were going to stay on, what it meant to be part of this team now, and your obligation to each and every one of us. When you went home, the expectation was you only went home. We were offering up grocery items and whatever was needed, so people did not have to leave, and they would go home, rest, clean up, come home, and come back to work. And the idea was to keep each and every one of us safe as we move through this. I was very fortunate. I'm a board member of the Connecticut Restaurant Association, which for anybody that's on this, owns restaurants or is looking to do it, the ctrestaurant.org, the Connecticut Restaurant Association is a tremendous organization. It's better than it's ever been. It's now led by a gentleman named Scott Dolch, and him and his team, immediately pivoted and started putting together real-time morning conference calls, 9 a.m. for all members and board members. And so I was getting real-time information immediately as soon as this thing started. At 9 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday, I would get state and federal updates that would kind of help get us through this and kind of figure out what was happening. And that was extremely helpful to me, and I think to all of us on the call, to know that there were other people that were a part of the situation. We could talk to each other as restaurateurs and chefs, and we could really help kind of get each other through this, because as you can imagine, nobody was expecting it and nobody was prepared for it. So, as we started to push ahead and realized that this was real and it wasn't going to get better anytime soon, we were just going to have to find a way to navigate through it. We really started to work on how to make it work. So, as we started to push ahead, we worked on controls and how to simplify our menu and how to work with things as, items that people that would better travel home. Kawani, my izakaya concept, was best suited for the transition. There's a perception that I think Asian food generally travels well, and it is probably a craveable cuisine. So Kawani immediately turned into sort of the workhorse of the company. The Welk and Chesapeake held their own, but was much more difficult for us to pivot and to understand how to get the food into to-go containers. So we had to make some menu adjustments, and we did it. And as we watched Kawani sort of soar to new heights, which was really interesting, I was able to spend some time, really focusing on the other 2 restaurants. So as we started to get through March and then through April, which seemed to be an eternity, there was some really fun stuff that was happening that I started to appreciate as this was happening. And that's where the excitement comment comes from before, was I started to see really creative, smart people started to come up with concepts to help each other and help other people. So obviously some of the people most affected by this were some of our frontline workers. So a good friend and a fellow board member on Food Rescue US, it's an organization that helps rescue food from and deliver it to areas of need, to soup kitchens and to homes of need. I'm a board member there as well. And Nicole Strait had put together just sort of an idea that she was going to feed the frontline responders food for the front line. So we were the first one at Jessup Hall. She gave me a call. She said, Bill, can you help me with this? This was literally a week into pandemic. I jumped on, we figured out what a cost it would be, and we started to put meals to go, and we'd send them off to frontline workers, hospital workers, EMS workers, police and fire. And this was a donation-based organization. She'd raise money, and people were really into it. And I think the community really came. So these kind of things were happening that sort of kept the excitement level up. And for me, I just felt like, okay, if we all just focus on helping each other out a little bit, we'll get through this. So as time's going on, and I realize all the different things that are coming at me, and we're, all 3 restaurants are now sort of working and moving. I now have to start thinking about how my restaurants are going to financially survive, right? So we've cut our staff down to essential workers, but now I needed to deal with rent and what that looked like, and sort of start to cut some of our fat. And fortunately, we have 3 businesses with 3 different landlords, but all of them, each and every one of them, were willing to negotiate with us. So that was a big help for us. So, as I go through the March and April, we're just us kind of head down working. It was a really trying time. It was stressful. I worked more in March and April than I probably worked in the last 3 years combined, but I really enjoyed it. And I really got a kick out of coming together with some like-minded people and just, finding a way to get through this. So as we, Steve, I'm going to have you flip over and we'll jump into May. This is where everything got a little interesting for us. So March and April, we're all about getting the restaurants in line to succeed the best they can, keeping people safe, feeding our frontline workers, working with some local food agencies in my town of Weston on how we could help some people that I had heard the food pantry was lacking. I think everything was kind of just, loose ends were sort of unwinding a little bit. So, while all that's happening, keeping in mind that there is this concern of, again, this extremely dangerous invisible enemy coming into our restaurant. So one day we're in May, and we have a planned vacation to come down on Mother's Day. We had all been working very hard. We had made the flip mid-March. We'd work all through April, and I had decided that each and every one of our employees had stayed on, and it was time for us to just take a break. In all honesty, I needed a break. I just couldn't imagine taking a couple of days off if I didn't give everybody else some time off. So I had a planned vacate. We had planned for all 3 restaurants to shut down on the 10th of May, and just take a break for a week and see what happens. Well, a few days before, one of my employees at the Well had come to me, I think it might have been the Thursday before, the Wednesday before, and said, hey, chef, one of the women in the house that I live with, he shared a home with a family in Bridgeport, had tested positive for coronavirus. So if you could imagine, I just couldn't even believe what I had heard. I had grabbed him immediately. I had him jump in his car. I jumped in mine. I rushed him down to Westport Urgent Care. And I got him a COVID test immediately. And 2 days later, his test came back positive, where I then had the whole entire staff, all 38 employees remaining, including myself, my wife, go down to Westport Urgent Care, and everybody got tested. We ended up having 5 other positive cases in the bunch. So at that point, we got through the weekend. Each and every one of those employees obviously were sent home. It was something we had to figure out how we were going to navigate through. We were worrying about our employees, as you can imagine. I was day to day, sometimes with 2 of them in particular. We were making calls and checking in every few hours because they had high fevers and they weren't feeling well. So we were sending food to them. But then it came to the decision where, luckily we were closing, but now I had to figure out what was supposed to be an extremely relaxing week, and sort of a bit of a pat on the back to myself and my staff for getting through this really tough time. Now was a week of just insanity because I had 5 sick employees. I'm obviously concerned about everybody else in my company. I'm trying to contact trace as best as I can. So for the week of the shutdown, instead of relaxing, I was on the phone constantly talking to Westport Weston Health, talking to the folks at Westport Urgent Care about what's best to do. What are my timeframes here? How long am I closed? What do I need to do next? And I learned a lot about COVID-19 and the effects it has on people and groups. So, we ended up where the idea was to actually open the weekend following the 10th, following Mother's Day. We were going to take a few days off, come back on the weekend. We obviously didn't do that. We had gone through the standard, the necessary 10-day break from a positive test. The sick employees were kept home for at least 2 weeks. I think 1 or 2 of them might even stayed out a little bit longer. We had everybody retested again, keeping in mind as well that not that it means much to anybody, but I did do the testing at Westport Urgent Care because I wanted quick response and it was easy. And I ended up paying about $100 to $125 a person to get that testing as well. So it was an expense I wasn't expecting for 38 employees. But thankfully, we got through it and we ended up opening the midweek the following week to where it was now time to start doing some outdoor dining. So during the week, and as we were planning this sort of changeover and turnover of how do we get back open, I also, as crazy as I am, and I hope this is all making sense, and Steve Smith, if it's not, you keep me in line, but through it, we had a really busy Mother's Day brunch at Jessup Hall. And what I had realized is I started to see the success Colony was having. The Welk is the Welk. The Welk is is sort of our it's our flagship. It's been running for 8 years. It's the community's favorite restaurant. They kind of run it themselves. And I saw the success of Colony and how easy it was to put this food into to-go containers, how easy it was to pivot, this is obviously meant with the utmost respect, but how much easier it was to staff the concept. It didn't take the cooks, the skill set of the cooks are very different than they are of Jessup Hall. So on Mother's Day, in the middle of all this, while what seemed to be the world crumbling, I also decided that I was going to shut down Jessup Hall. And a lot of it was probably because of the stress I was feeling, but mostly because I was just bored of the concept. When I opened it 3.5 years ago, I didn't love it. I felt like I put the wrong concept in a space. I had an opportunity to open a restaurant in a really beautiful building, and I put the wrong concept there. And I was listening to some people in my ear and they were telling me what they wanted, and I just never fell in love with it. I spent the last 1.5 years getting it to where I wanted, and I was really proud of it the last 1.5 years, Jessup Hall. And once I felt like I got there, I started to realize that it was probably time to change. So on Mother's Day, after a very busy Mother's Day brunch at Jessup Hall, after screaming and yelling at everybody in the restaurant, and I was unhappy with what the salads looked like and everything else, I took a few laps around Westport and I came inside and I told everybody we were shutting the restaurant down. I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't thinking Mexican. I went home and I said to my wife, I'm closing it. I can't carry all 3 of these restaurants. I kind of lost my mind for 24 hours. And on Monday, I decided that I was going to do a Mexican restaurant. It's a cuisine and a culture that's near and dear to my heart. I traveled. Fortunately, I've been very fortunate to travel to Mexico to eat numerous times over the last 5 or 6 years. Unfortunately, I'm missing it right now, but I would typically go to Mexico City once, if not twice a year, the last 5 or 6 years. So I just fell in love with it. I have a group of employees, a band of employees that have worked with me for 17, 18 years that are from Mexico and Guatemala. And they're just the backbone of my restaurant. And I just felt like I needed something fresh and new and different. And I felt like the community needed something exciting. I felt like we were all kind of spinning in circles a little bit. And so I made the change, which was pretty crazy as everyone's trying to figure out to open a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic. But we did it. And again, ADD kicked in, and that's where I work really, really well. So I was bored of what I had and I wanted to change it. So as we were putting together the Jess and Paul, now Jess and Paul is closed. Don Memo now is turning into a Mexican restaurant. I called in my people. We did interior aesthetic changes, complete menu change. I took my executive chef, Anthony Costellas from the Welk, who's one of the best cooks I know. And I essentially fired him from the Welk because he's such a creature of habit and never wanted to leave there. And I fired him from the Welk. Yeah. And I told him that he was going to come and be my chef at Don Memo. Thankfully, he agreed. And I put a group of people together to get to work. All in time, we were also looking at outdoor dining, which was obviously going to become a very important part of our business. And in all honesty, we had the opportunity on May 17th to start outdoor dining. We really started, I was hesitant because again, there was a part of me, especially just coming out of a few employees testing positive for COVID. I was a little concerned about what this looked like, having more people on property. But as I got back into the swing of things, I started to realize not only was it something our community wanted, I started to, talk to my staff members and realize that they were into this as well. They wanted the interaction with people. They wanted to have people on property, and they wanted to go back to what they do best, which is talking to people about our food and our drinks and just giving people a special experience. So as we were redesigning and putting together a new concept for Jess and Paul, Don Memo, we were also opening and putting together the plan to open the patios at the rooftop at Colony and the front patio at the Welk. As this was happening, I'm pretty close. I'm also on the board of the DMA, the Downtown Merchants Association for Westport. So I'm pretty close with the town of Westport, and they're just a great group of people that have been running that town and helping us through this process. I was sort of commissioned to help put together procedures and protocols for what it looked like to open the patios. And, with my available intel from the CRA and what's coming directly from the governor's office in Connecticut, I was able to help the town of Westport put together a plan to safely open its patios for all its restaurants. So, and that again gave me a little bit of confidence that we were kind of doing the right thing. So we went to work, and we put some tables and chairs, and had a friend of mine that had a bunch of beer garden tables, and we painted them and we put them outside the Welk, and we put that plan together. We obviously had a lot of training that we needed to put together. I'm just moving this out of the way. There was a big part of training because now we have to start getting our staff in line of what it meant, to work safely, and what the guidelines were that were put together by CDC and also the state of Connecticut and local health officials. So as we started to, look at this, I had to figure out how to make sure that the people that we were going to be serving were going to be kept safe, and that my employees and staff were going to be kept safe. So, we did that. And thankfully, we have a really great team of people. So we started to just send out tasks and give everybody sort of an idea what their jobs were going to be and what it meant to open. So we went to work. And on May 20th, we started outdoor dining. A good part of it was, we still had a good part of curbside dining in particular, especially at Colony. Thankfully, the Welk curbside dining kind of had fell off, pickup had fallen off a little bit, understandably. I think, especially as it started to warm up a little bit, And then when people could kind of come outside, and we were okay with that because it was really hard to deal with both as it was happening. So, you know, there's just a lot of things happening at the time. We had the Welk patio open, my staff, you know, working with my staff and making sure that every table was sanitized and everybody felt safe when they came in, but also, you know, worrying about my staff members out on a patio wearing masks all day long. It's not easy. And for anybody who knows, you know, I hate it. So, but we have to do it. So now I have staff members that are wearing masks. So, you know, we start to put together plans for, and we were designing masks with people, with local tailors. But it was an interesting situation. So, you know, Steve, we could probably move over to.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Bill, Steve Smith here. So, so a great summary of all the history that got you there. I think a lot of the folks would want to hear more about the operations of on-site dining these days. I know this is where you're going, but I do want to remind us all that we're at 12:30 now, so we do need to move along a little bit. But I think focusing on what operations work, and I think especially this move to Don Memo from, you know, you kind of mentioned it, it's like to shut down one complete, you know, kind of a theme and start a completely different theme is a very gutsy call. And you might want to just you know, elaborate a little bit on what you intend to get out of Don Memo you couldn't get out of Jessup Hall.
Yeah, great. So I just, you know, the curbside dining, I would go to that really quick. First and foremost, for anybody that was following some of the federal stimulus money that was coming out, PPP originally, when first presented, was not sort of best suited for the restaurant industry. You know, the timing didn't work for us. So, and we were open, and I had a lot of friends in the industry that weren't. But, you know, initially it was sort of, you know, it was an 8-week payoff plan. You had to, you know, 75% of the money had to go to your payroll, 25 to your overhead allowance, to overhead expenses. But the 8-week period was really tough, bringing back all of your employees. We didn't need all of our employees. We didn't have full occupancy. But again, having sort of direct intel into what, you know, into federal and state updates every morning with the CRA, we started to get a sense as an organization that this PPP loan and the way that it was structured was going to change. And so my wife, who does all our finances and our payables, you know, was aware of this as well. And thankfully, we kind of held on to the money. And as some or most may know, you know, it was restructured to a 60-40 split payroll to overhead, and the duration was pushed out to 24 weeks. So, you know, in the middle of all this, and I would say why the restaurants were sort of successful, and which also allowed me, Steve, to your point of transitioning a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic, when I was sitting, you know, Jessup Hall had received its PPP money. So I'm now working with, in theory, you know, free money to help pay for staff and pay for my overhead, my occupancy costs and my utilities. So that gave me a little bit of confidence to know that I could bring some staff back. I could change over the concept. But it was also very helpful in Colony and the Welk, because sales might have been a little bit lower than they were, although in Colony, sales were higher than they ever were when we had indoor occupancy, because I didn't have a limitation on seating in a very small restaurant. So, you know, we were really, we were doing well through the curbside and takeout, especially as we started to get some of the stimulus money. It really helped us. And we were able to, through this process, and I think and it was a point that I missed that I want to make sure, what was most important to me, especially with our staff members that were staying on with us, cooks, was they were working much less because the hours of operation were much less. We were serving from 4 to 8 as opposed to, you know, full days of service from 12 to 10. But I was able to pay them at minimum, you know, 90% of their original rate, even though they were working, you know, 20 hours a week less than they were. So, and that was a lot of that, you know, that sort of gave us a lot of confidence as we pushed forward. And I think team morale was really high. So that was important as well. Switching over, part of the reason the move was made from Jessup Hall was it's an expensive restaurant to run. You know, it takes a lot of talent. I was getting tired of explaining to new young cooks the importance of passion and understanding what ingredients are needed to make, you know, a good dish. And I just felt like Bill Taibe American cuisine had sort of run its course for me personally. I've been cooking for 24 years of my life, and I'm an extremely passionate, obsessive person. And I just felt like I was looking for a new challenge. Partly the reason, or mainly the reason why I had opened Kawane was because I needed a challenge. And I wanted to learn about the Japanese culture and a new cuisine. So I think with Don Memo is, you know, Jessa Paul started to get a little too nice. It just got a little too nice. It seemed too important when you came, and it didn't feel right to me anymore. So I just felt with the way the town was supporting us, the team I had around me, and again, some of this additional money that was going to help us sort of carry us through this change, the switch over to Don Memo seemed very easy to me. I think, you know, for anybody on the outside, you might think it's a crazy move, but I have a tremendous amount of faith in our community, and I have a tremendous amount of faith in our staff. And I'm generally pretty confident in our concepts. It was an easy move for us. It made a lot of sense at the time. The food travels better, but it's also fresh and light and fun. And I think this pandemic, if it's telling us anything, is that, you know, life is a little wacky. So, you know, instead of working too hard to make something too precious, I wanted it to be fun. I wanted to serve tequila. I obsess about the cuisine of Mexico. And it is the epitome of everything I love about cooking, which is local, sort of vibrant cuisine. So, you know, it just made sense to us. It made a lot of sense to move it. And because I had the money, I was able to do it. You know, as I look now to what Don Memo is, it's, you know, there's such a buzz in the air in the community around it. The patio, we have this big, beautiful, vibrant patio. We started to realize that, you know, the food, albeit, you know, we charge less for it, but the profit margins are higher on it, right? So, which is very important when you're trying to make money in a restaurant. And I've never been really good at that before. I've always been a ingredient driven sort of entrepreneur. And I always wanted to make sure that you, the customer, would have the best experience with the best ingredients. And I'd worry about making money secondly. So again, Kawane was a great motivator for me when I started to realize that vibrancy of cuisine is extremely important, especially if it's something people don't think they can make at home. And it doesn't always have to be truffles and morel mushrooms and foie gras. So that's where we started to really kick into Don Memo. It just, as a business, it made a little bit better for us. Just looking at a question. Yeah, so, you know, I had the Don Memo concept was really interesting. There's a group of brothers that have worked with me for about 18 years, the Garcia brothers. So, and one of them is Memo Garcia. And I just thought this is a good little side note to and why I had done the Don Memo concept. You know, these brothers have worked with me for 17, 18 years. They've been busboys, but they're essentially the backbone to my business. And one of them is in particularly very special to me. And when I decided to change the concept over, I was going to name the restaurant Cantina Memo Garcia for one of the brothers. And when I was telling him about the changeover, he had said to me and told me, you know, that he was honored and that was great. But when they were little boys, their father, Memo as well, senior, had a cantina in Puebla, Mexico, and their father had passed in 1998, but it had a cantina in Puebla, Mexico called Cantina Don Memo. So immediately that was the reason for the name. And we just kind of fell in love with it. And, you know, they got behind it. It's been really good. It's been a nice transition for us. You know, as we started to work through the Don Memo concept, keeping in mind as well is that we did get indoor dining, and that was another thing that we had to start to think about. So, you know, as we pick and pivot through this crazy scenario and changing restaurants, it really sort of There were just so many different things happening, but it was a good opportunity for us to take advantage of what was in front of us, and we did that. And I think that's where most of our success would come from.
Yeah, and I think, Bill, the slide that's up there now, the challenge of the new reality for restaurants, kind of like, what's the business model of the future for the restaurant business? And not just for, I'm not an owner of a restaurant, but I go to restaurants. And so, what should we all expect in the future? What makes sense for restaurateurs and owners, and what's going to make sense for the restaurant goer, if you will, in your opinion?
Well, I'm going to go right here. So this is, the food chain is in disarray. It's impossible right now to get good fish because fishermen are not fishing. It's extremely expensive to send boats out. So if less people are buying, there's less boats going out, and the food is less available to us. Cost of product is rising. I work with a lot of local farms in Fairfield County throughout Connecticut. And what I'm noticing is immediately some of the local farms, they pivoted their business as well to a CSA model, as people were less likely to go into a grocery store and more likely to identify their local farms. Less ingredients were available to us early on. The spring obviously is slim pickings anyway in Connecticut, but where we would generally start to see an uptick in produce, that was not available to us. Everything kind of changed in the distribution system for us. And, Baldor, Dairyland, Ace Endico, all these large companies we use started to cut down staff, cut off staff. And you realized that, they were dealing with some of the same stuff we were. But what I'm noticing is, and what I was hoping at the time, was all of these changes were going to help us make our systems better. And I haven't seen it yet. So I haven't, when this thing first hit, my sales rep over at Baldor, who I had not, Baldor is a produce distributor, really a grocery distributor now down in the Bronx. I hadn't spoken to my sales rep, Paul, in 6 years. He doesn't call. I pay my bills. He's happy. He doesn't really call in. And as soon as this hit, he was calling me every other day, sending me and telling me all the sale items they had in the abundance. And I get, the inventory list where they were sitting on, 2,500 cases of avocados. What I think is going to happen sort of in the next couple of years, is I think, we're going to be looking at just a different model. I think we have to be aware of, what's available to us. Part of the reason, again, switching to Dom Amo, is I get to use less ingredients. People are gonna be looking for a more casual experience. I think they're gonna be looking for something a little bit easier. I'm not concerned in my market whether or not cost is a factor, thankfully, but I'm always aware of it, and I never want to overcharge for anything. I want to make sure the experience makes sense for people. But I think generally speaking, people are going to be looking for an easier model, an easier concept to just come in and sit and relax and enjoy. We're dealing with 50% occupancy right now. So right, in the middle of the summer, where I have the Welk and Don Amo are operating at, a pretty good number because of large outdoor dining rooms. And, not as many people are eating inside as we'd like, but we're doing okay. When those outdoor areas disappear in the colder months, what's going to happen? My restaurants cannot survive on 15% or 50% occupancy. They just can't survive. Yeah. So it's sort of it's a scary outlook, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you say the dining aesthetic has changed, back to the other chart there, Steve Gorenberg, on the what do you mean by that? That's the casual. You think in the near term anyway, people, at least for the rest of the summer and the fall, that'll be the case, right?
Yeah, I do. I think, I have a few different people have reached out to me, and, I've spoken on a few other panels, and, my recommendation to anybody looking to get into the business was, don't overcomplicate the concept. Keep it simple. My brother owns a restaurant in Bethel. and he called me up right in the middle of it, and he said, what should we do? He's obviously in a much smaller community. And I said, Jeff, sell roast chicken, sell things people love, sell things you're good at. Don't overcomplicate the concept. We need to, and our industry is loaded with costs, unnecessary costs, just lots of fat. So I think taking a fresher look at what's necessary when running a business is really important moving forward. And we're going to see a lot of restaurants that had a lot of fluff on them, and they're just not going to make it.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next chart there, Steve. Good, great. Yeah, that's kind of the question I've always had, and it's not just restaurants in my mind either. I mean, you even go to Trader Joe's, and they've probably got 50% the flow that they used to have based on the space limitations or the spacing limitations. So everybody's under this pressure of how many people can get in and how many people can get through, and that's the challenge, I guess, right?
So this has been a tricky situation for us, but earlier in one of the first slides, you had mentioned a 3% kitchen share that we had put on about 3.5 years ago. When I opened Jessa Paul, I was looking for just a better way to help pay my kitchen staffs a better wage. And obviously, anybody that's been following the restaurant industry is well aware of Danny Meyer's Hospitality Included. And so we spent a few years prior trying to figure out the best way to get a little more income to pay our kitchen staff a better wage. So we introduced this 3% kitchen share. Essentially, it was a 3% service charge. It was added on all food. So, for $100 worth of food, it was additional $3. And we got great response. And it really, it sort of added up to about $1.50 to $2, sometimes $3 an hour a week for our kitchen staff, additionally to their wage that we had already preset for them. So, that was all well and good, but through the pandemic, as the way we were best able to survive before PPP money started to come in, because keeping in mind, like I said, Don Mamo and the Welk had only recently started to use their PPP money. We were really surviving on cost of food, because obviously there was very little alcohol sales, cost of food, food sales, and then these surcharges we were putting on sort of our delivery fees. And that's what was sort of bringing in income to then redistribute to our staff. And that's how we were able to maintain a decent wage for our staff. As I looked at that and we started to get into the outdoor dining opening, I realized that a big fear of mine was what would happen was my kitchen staff was somehow going to go back to their normal wage, $13, $14, $15, $16 an hour, depending on where you were in the hierarchy. And I started to worry that, one, would the food revenue be enough to pay that with what we were doing? But secondly, as front of the house staff started to come on and sit on the outdoor dining patio, and people started to come in and say, it must have been tough for you guys. And they started adding these sort of outrageous gratuities to their bill. That money was going to go directly to the front of the house staff and none of it to the kitchen, because I don't have right to that money. So what we decided to do instead was actually add a service charge to all 3 restaurants. So that we sort of did a service charge included. We added a 20% service charge to the bill, which then gives me the right to the money, and then I can redistribute it. So now all 3 of my restaurants work on a service charge system. I don't know if it's a short-term or long-term solution, but what it's doing right now is it's sort of lessened the gap between the front and back of the house of my restaurants. My cooks and my servers are essentially making very similar money. The servers are still making a little more because it's just the way the system's been set up in our restaurant industry, and they do have to deal with people and they're putting themselves at risk. But I've been able to lessen the gap. So my cooks now are generally working for anywhere between $17 and $19 an hour. My servers are making upwards of $20 to $22 an hour. But I've lessened the gap by taking in the money. So it's been a really interesting sort of test to see, and the customers have really adapted well to it. And we've obviously had a couple service staff members that struggled with the concept, maybe some of the old guard, and I explained to them that this is unfortunately how it's going to be, and a change needs to be made in our industry. And I think after they were able to sort of digest it and see how they were not making much less than they were making before, because what we had done was we took all front of the house employees and we moved them up to a minimum wage, not a tipped wage, not a tipped minimum wage. So,
Right.
they went from $6.35 an hour as a tipped wage employee to $11 an hour as a minimum wage employee. So that additional raise in money as well helped counter sort of what they might have been losing. So it's been an interesting study the last couple of weeks, and I'm very curious to see how long we could carry this on. I've had a few conversations with some other restaurateurs who are actually interested in sort of introducing the same system in their restaurant.
Yep.
What else do we have, guys?
Is there, so Steve, is there another slide here? Bill, a question I had, we mentioned the eventuality that it's going to get cold again. So it's November 15th and we've just had our first freezing rain here in Westport, and you can't see people outside anymore. What are the changes that you think you need from, I don't want to say regulation point of view, but from a COVID environment point of view, in terms of putting people together again, that could give you the cash flow to make the inside dining work?
Right. Well, first thing is we need our customers obviously to feel safe. We need consumer confidence. That's number one. I'm working really hard with the CRA as well to sort of pester the governor as to what it's going to look like in the fall and try to really think ahead for this, whether or not occupancy will expand or there will be some sort of funding. Keeping in mind as well that anybody that had asked for PPP money and was sort of ahead of the game, generally will have their PPP money run till the end of the year if they account for it properly.
Mm-hmm.
We already started looking into dividers and separators in all of our restaurants. I had made a sort of, a dark alley polycarbonate purchase on some plexiglass of a guy that had it because I knew it was just impossible to get. And someone called me up and told me they had 3 large sheets of it. So I bought it and put it in the basement. And we started now to Kawane. If anybody goes over to Kawane, which is the smallest of all of our restaurants, now you'll see we have dividers through our banquettes. So, and what the dividers do is they allow us to actually seat without any social distance spaces in between our tables.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the future is going to look like. I am holding off on the Welk and Don Memo right now from building the dividers in the hopes that they'll be unnecessary as we get to when we get to the point where we may need them. But we are prepared to do that. I'm really concerned, really concerned, and nobody's talking about it, that when outdoor dining is done and if and when we are still at 50% occupancy, I'm going to go through the same round of layoffs that I had to go through previously when this thing first hit. And I don't know if the money's going to be there to help protect my furloughed employees, what that's going to look like. Can't imagine there'll be another stimulus package and PPP money coming our way. So I think we got a long road ahead of us. And right now we're kind of riding high in the summer because people are coming out. It feels good, but check in with me in 4 or 5 months and we may have a different story.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's why I was asking the question, because as I said, there's, this same phenomena applies to a lot of other of our clients that are in what you would call high density kind of businesses, and restaurants are definitely high density. So for those of you who are on this webinar, please feel free to ask Bill some questions in the chat room.
A question there from Adrian. And the modification of HVAC systems has been brought up a few different times, and I have not heard that yet. It seems to be sort of a conversation right now. We have, according to local health in Westport and anything coming from the state of Connecticut, we are seating people inside. We are socially distancing tables right now. Obviously, everybody has the masks on, but there's been no conversation about modifications to our air systems. So, but I've sort of heard rumblings of it. Hopefully not, because it's another cost that's gonna, that we'll have to take on.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess some of the venues have a better circulation systems or air handling systems than others as well. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Was there any other questions, Steve?
yeah. Any other questions for Bill?
I'm looking here as well from Adrian, the benefits, through the pivots there, when we were making some of these changes, I think a lot of, it's a great question because a lot of what we've done recently over the last few months, I think has reshaped my business model. So I just think for me, a general understanding of what's important in my restaurants. I've sort of changed my approach to what I think is important in terms of staffing, the types of people I want to hire, who my essential workers are, what my customers are looking for. So, some of the systems we put in place will have, as you could see, I changed the whole entire concept because of the pandemic. And it's been an exciting, challenging time, but I think it's only making my company, my business that much stronger. We learned to survive through this. I had through, 3.5 months, however, 4 months we've been going through this, my team stepped up and worked hard. And I think they all started to realize, how fragile all of this is, but what a good organization and company that we've put together as a group, and how we protect each other and how we take care of each other. So, there's a lot we learned through it and a lot that I think will reshape my business in the middle of all of this. The craziness, which I kind of forgot to throw in during all my rambling, was that we had also purchased a food truck so that I have coming in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is a whole new business model that I think is going to fit nicely within this sort of social distancing scheme we have coming on. So look forward to that as well in the coming weeks.
Well, now that, I actually, that's food trucks have become very popular. I mean, they're, I actually know, have a good friend who has a son who runs a food truck business in Brooklyn or in that part of Manhattan. And is this, what kind of food would you be serving there? And like, where would you put it and how would you manage that? Because that is an add-on to that.
Yeah.
We laugh at and smile about it, but actually this is actually was becoming more and more on the scene actually in the restaurant business.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really was an impulse buy. Colony was doing so well through this. Our business was skyrocketing, our costs were low. And in the middle of it, I essentially did a cash purchase on a brand new food truck in the middle of the pandemic. This was before I decided I was flipping to Don Mamo as well. So it's a beautiful pewter gray, fully outfitted truck that's being delivered from Georgia in 10 days. I did not put a logo on it. And the reason is again, part of the Don Mamo changeover, which I think that fits nicely within a food truck concept, much better than the Jessup Hall concept did, was it could be Colony, it could be Don Mamo, we can do the Welk. Right now, we're working on a plan in the next 2 or 3 weeks to actually situate it in downtown Westport. I've been given approvals for downtown Westport to situate it and outfit it with ice cream because we don't have an ice cream shop in downtown Westport. So this truck is going to be a really good sort of incubator for ideas, but and all I really want to do with it over the next couple of weeks and coming months before it gets too cold is to kind of just get the truck moving a little bit. I'm not worried about, where it will be. Right now, it's just about how we're going to run it and how we're going to operate it. So an ice cream concept, maybe on the weekends in Westport, do a couple parties, maybe put it up at a friend's cul-de-sac. And then next year, really come into the spring, have the winter to really plan it out, come into the spring next year with a real good plan on how to move this mobile kitchen that I think just gives us a whole nother opportunity for revenue.
I think you also have to kind of train the consumer a little bit on this, at least where you're operating in that, in that part of Fairfield County. I think they're not used to that, but they use it a little bit this summer. It'd be more viable. I get that totally. Hey, we've only got 1 minute. And so this is going to be against protocol, but I wanted to get this one last question in because one of the things that everyone talks about is what's going to happen on the other end of this pandemic. and assuming there is going to be an end, which we're not going to debate here, but lots of other things are changing that could impact you that you might not even be able to see. For example, Steve Domian asked this question, and you can read it too, Bill. It'll take us past 1 o'clock. I apologize for that, but as you use less food and as local farmers discover the possibilities of local delivery to end consumers, I'm not sure of that, but yes, do you expect even higher costs to you for local grown? And where does that I don't like this term, but where does that spiral go?
Yeah, it's a really serious question.
That's a very serious question.
You know, and part of another thing I do is I'm actually the president of the Westport Farmers Market. So I'm really involved in this concept, and I'm very concerned about it. I have a lot of dear friends who are farmers. You know, we do what we can and as much as we can to buy as much product as we can from our local farmers. Right now, the ones that are doing well, I think, are the ones that are putting themselves out there and sort of forcing their product on people. I've also had conversations with some farmers that are specialty farmers, you know, who would sell goat cheese, for instance, that are sort of niche farmers that are really struggling to get their product out because it's a luxury item. So I think the same thing I had to do with my restaurant, which was to just sort of pick up and pivot and figure out how to get people to my product and my product to people. I think farmers have to do the same thing. The hardest part I see in our local farming industry is the ability to deliver food, is, you know, sort of the cost of labor against the, you know, the profit margins are off. The numbers are wrong. So I'm concerned about it. You know, we will go with the trend of cost, so to speak. You know, I would never push my farmers away because I think their product's too expensive. I would do everything I can to work with them. But my hopes is that those farmers really sit back and try to think of a creative way to get their product to more people. I think delivery service is something that we're going to be looking at for quite a while. You know, it's a great question. I don't have the long-term answer for it, but I think right now is a great opportunity for everyone to sort of reorganize their concepts and find ways people are ready to take, you know, so you just got to find out how to get it to them.
Yeah, reorganize that supply chain,
Right.
kind of like set it all over again.
Right.
I totally get it. So listen, that's all really that we have time for today. We try to make a commitment to end right at 1 o'clock. And as a reminder to those of you that have been listening and participating, the webinar will be available within the next 48 hours on fairfieldcounty.score.org on our website. And again, you'll see when you go to that website that SCORE does offer free individual counseling. So you can sign up right on the website to take advantage of that service. You're also going to get an evaluation at the end of the webinar, or a form for which you can fill out an evaluation at the end of the webinar. So please do that. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's live webinar. And in closing, a really, really big thank you to Bill Taibe for presenting today and helping us understand the challenges that he's been through, and hopefully they're also transferable to others in the audience. So thank you very much. Have a good day. And thank you again, Bill.
Thanks, guys. Goodbye.